Good evening, everyone. It's so good to have you here today, and well, this evening, I should say. I hope you're all keeping well, and if you are in a lockdown environment, you're maintaining some kind of sanity. And I think today, look, I think e-commerce is obviously a really trending element right now, especially for a lot of businesses. And we today are going to go through a bit of what the foundations are when it comes to e-com data, and I guess some of the metrics you really need to be aware of in order to not only understand what's going on an e-commerce store, but also how to optimize it to improve performance. And there's a lot of them actually need to really, I guess, they intertwine together, and they basically have a really can have a massive impact on your bottom line and also your client retention, your customer retention, a whole lot of things. Just before we start, I'll just go a quick overview as to who I am and why I'm qualified to talk about this tonight. I founded an agency called Misfit Digital about 3.5 years ago in Northcote in Melbourne, which is part of the Darebin precinct. And so since then, we are now an award-winning agency in the e-commerce space, and we primarily work with Australian businesses and New Zealand and some of the US as well to help them to create e-commerce strategies as well as basically improve their overall marketing performance. So our team is based in Melbourne, and they're all in lockdown at the moment. So normally we're based, our offices in Northcote as well. But at the moment, I think Sana from my team's actually here too, but they're all working very diligently from home. And the beautiful thing about what we have is things like Zoom to be able to, help clients and really communicate still effectively. So basically, what I find with a lot of clients is that they'll come to us, or a lot of people starting out, and when it comes to anything in digital, there's a ton of data around. So it's more about how to take that data and make strategic decisions based on it. And I think that's really why a lot of you are here today. But I do understand that we do have a mixed group of skill set on this webinar. So I will start with some of the fundamentals, but then I will touch on a bit of how you can use some of these metrics and basically manipulate them in a way, and manipulate's probably the wrong word, but improve them and optimize them in order to be able to improve your e-commerce performance. So today we're going to go through about 13 metrics that you need to know to grow your store. Now, some of these are metrics that are going to be looking at the traffic drivers to your site. So what you should be looking at from more of an advertising or an organic content perspective. We'll also look at some of the on-page metrics. So what you need to know to improve your conversion, or what people are doing on your site and how to make them do more of what you want them to do. And then also the conversion metrics. So what you need to look at in order to understand how people are buying on your site. The other thing as well we're going to look at is some of the retention elements. So a big thing in e-commerce is about getting people to come back again and again. So that loyalty element. So if you are in a position where you maybe have one element of these that's doing really well, but some of these other areas are falling down, they all interlink at some level. So we'll kind of run through how that looks. So just a word of not warning, but a bit we need to know. A lot of this is quite text heavy. Reason being, I wanted you to all have a takeaway element so that you can refer to this. There is a lot of information in the sessions. So I'm not expecting everyone to be able to take it on board straight away, but as Stephanie mentioned, this resource will be available for you afterwards to be able to make sure that you can refer to it as required. Also, it's a fantastic resource, I believe, if you've got a team member internally or someone else who's going to be monitoring this, so that you can also know what you're talking about. This is really, really important too. If you're getting an agency or an external contractor to help with your business, you need to kind of know what to ask in order to understand if they're doing their job properly. So hopefully this will help you. So we'll kick off. Now, the first one is impressions. Now, an impression basically, to make it in layman's terms really, is how many times a piece of content is shown to someone. So say you're on Facebook and you get shown an ad from Spotlight, for example. The amount of times that ad is shown to an individual is an impression. So this can be also for your blogs, for example, how many times your blogs have been appeared if you put it into your social media feed. There's numerous ways that you can use this, or on Google as well. But what it really is telling you here, it's saying two things. If you're doing an advertising buy, it's letting you know that actually your content has been shown to people. Really, really important. If you're ever doing an ad buy and it's got a really low number of impressions and you're paying a really, really high cost for a CPM, which is basically cost per impression, per 1,000 impressions, I should say. It's a way for you to be able to gauge if that content's actually been seen. Now, this, I guess in itself, isn't really going to be a metric that's going to change the dial, but it's actually a really important one when we look at some of the other elements around, especially advertising for e-commerce, and I'll explain why in a second. So the main thing here that you probably want to be looking through for traffic driving. So what I mean by traffic driving is when people see a piece of content and then actually click through to your website. That shows a lot more buyer intent, obviously, than if someone's just been served an ad, meaning when I say served an ad, they've seen an ad or a piece of content. That means that they've seen it. But again, it might not be the right audience that you have been showing things to. So the click-through rate is a good way to validate if your content is relevant to the audience that you actually want to engage. Now, because if you've got, let's say, as an example here, if 1,000 people have seen your ad and only 10 of them have clicked on it, your click-through rate would be 1%. So obviously, the higher the click-through rate, the more relevant your content is to the target audience you're reaching. Now, there are a lot of variables that can come into play here. With advertising, it could be your targeting strategy. So if your click-through rate is really low, you'd want to be looking to make sure that you're targeting the right people. So, for example, if you've got a product that's targeting new mums, for example, and it's doing, but your targeting for your advertising is targeting every woman from 20 to 50, you're probably wasting a lot of your advertising dollars because you're not being niche enough to reach the target segment that you want. So what you would be wanting to say to your advertising partner or your when you're doing your own ads is going, okay, with my targeting, how can I make sure that I am being as effective as possible at connecting with the target market that I want? So, you want to be making sure that you are targeting, like for that example, if you're doing Facebook targeting, you'd want to be looking at either similar brands that new mums would be looking at, or similar publications that they're looking at and targeting from an interest-based level. Or if you've got a database of people that you've already previously engaged with, so an email list or a customer list, you can actually upload that to Facebook or Google. There's numerous platforms you can do this with, and you can create what's called a lookalike audience. So it's going to find people who look exactly like your previous customers. So again, things that you can look from a targeting point of view to really improve your performance. Now, the other thing that can actually play an impact on your click-through rate is your content. Now, think of it this way. Say you're targeting down, you're targeting those new mums, but the content that you're putting out there maybe is the content is grandma or it's the dad in that respect. You've got to make sure that whatever content you're putting out, especially from an ad strategy, and even an organic strategy too, organic, just for those who don't know, is content that you put up that it doesn't have any advertising dollars behind it. Then in itself, you need to make sure everything is relevant to your target market. You will have a higher click-through rate if your content is speaking directly to your target audience. And so they're just a couple of ways that you can really start to improve your click-through rate from an advertising perspective. The same thing goes on Google Ads. If you're running Google Ads and you're targeting certain keywords, but your actual text ads or your display ads aren't reflecting what those keywords are, that can be a pretty big signal that your click-through rate is going to be pretty low. So again, it's all about relevancy. Now, the main things when we get to the website itself, the next ones are kind of more about how to optimize the site to make sure that, so you know what people are doing on when they get to your site, because a lot of people just look at the conversion rate. I'll go into in a bit, but the conversion rate effectively is how many people have been to your site versus how many have actually purchased, which is a great metric at the end of the sales process, I guess. But there are other things that you should be looking at from a metrics point of view on your website that can tell you a story a bit. So, for example, this one here is the add to cart rate. So if you've been, I'm sure everyone here has been on a website and purchased something. when you go to the website and you actually click and you add to cart, that's a percentage, that's a metric in itself, because you want to know there, it's telling you a few things. Firstly, are you actually getting the right people to your site? Now, what happens again? It says that new mums example again. So maybe you've got a piece of content that is really, really clever and it's engaging a certain audience, and you're getting a lot of people there, but actually the product has got nothing to do with that group of people coming to your website. So that's something to look at. Again, if you've got a low add to cart rate, meaning that there's a low number of people actually putting things in the cart to show intent to buy, check to make sure that you're bringing the right people through to the site, and you can look at that through your social and organic content. Now, the other thing as well, when we talk about, there's a process called a sales funnel effectively, and it still applies for e-commerce. So there's going to be people who come to your site who are in market to buy, and they're kind of down the bottom of the funnel. The whole point for them really is that they come to your site with a specific purpose in mind. Now, if you've got an ad or a piece of content out there, say you're selling, baby dummies for babies, for example. If you're a new mum and you've got a screaming baby at home and you just want to basically find a pacifier to keep them quiet, in that respect, then you are going to be ready to buy, because you are at the point where you just need to solve this problem. You know your problem and you need to solve it. However, if you are a expectant new mum, for example, you may not know yet the problem may not be a reality yet, but you may know down the future it's something you need to consider. So in this respect, it could be that they're actually just looking around. So they may have read an article somewhere that explains the benefits of dummies pacifiers for babies, and what they may be doing in that respect is looking around different stores that actually can solve that potential problem, but they're not in market to buy yet. Now, this is why having a retargeting pixel, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically a bit of code that is supplied by actually Google and Facebook. Both have their own ones, but they're the main ones you probably need to know at this stage. It's a piece of code that goes onto your website and it starts recording the visitors who have been to your site previously. So this is really, really effective, because if that person has come to your site and hasn't yet purchased, you can actually retarget or show them ads down the track until they actually make that purchase. So again, when it comes to e-commerce, there's only a small percentage of people who are in market as soon as they get to your website. So you've got to make sure that you're doing everything possible to allow yourself the opportunity to close that sale down the line. The other thing too, and the third point down there, is that people will potentially be looking for, is your product going to solve their problem, as I mentioned before, and meet their expectations? So, for example, people may be looking for Australian-made pacifiers, and if yours doesn't meet that, then obviously that's based off what they need. You either can exclude that customer, or you need to have a very valid case or a sales pitch effectively on your product page to explain the benefits of why your product is superior to others. Now, this also feeds into the price element. Now, a lot of people, especially in e-commerce, if it's a product that is, I guess, unbranded and it's just solving a need, so it could be a water bottle or something like that, but especially if it's unbranded and not designed, people will search around to find the cheapest deal. Now, there are ways to combat that. Obviously, you can obviously, if you've got product more so than ever nowadays, if your products are located in the country where people are searching, that is a big draw card, because if anyone's bought online at the moment, especially overseas, the amount of time it takes to get delivery, and especially from the further abroad you go at the moment, it can take weeks currently. So if the customer needs it now, it can be a way to basically convince them to purchase off your site, and then they may be happy to purchase more, to spend more, sorry. Now, the other element too is that when it comes, and this is where branding comes down and is quite important as well. Think about it this way. I'm sure many of you buy clothes. I know myself, I do. And, there are certain scenarios where people are willing to spend $1,000 on a dress with a designer, and you know, and maybe they'll go to Kmart and spend $50. The dress may look very, very similar. Sure, the quality will be different. The design, the ethical production is probably different as well. But at the end of the day, you need to, if the people don't recognize your brand and what it stands for, then they're going to find it pretty hard to part with a big amount of money. If it's they just need it, and it's say for example they just need a summer dress because it's hot and they're going to the beach one day, then obviously that's a need. They're not really going to go and spend, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars on something unless they value the brand. And so that's where building your brand, and you see this a lot in fashion and beauty and those kind of, I guess, consumer goods, particularly focused on fashion and things that we wear on our body from a personal representation point of view. You tend to see that the branding and that's why social content is so important. And you see the value of influencers and people like that to raise the profile and the, I guess, the relevancy of your brand as well, and the value of your brand. So all of this takes into effect. Now, what I've done actually here, I've added on each of these the formulas, so you can figure them out yourselves based off the numbers that are that you've got available in your dashboards. A lot of this information, if you're running Shopify or WooCommerce or Magento, any of those kind of main, I guess, pre-developed platforms, you will see this information in the back end. It's more understanding, as I said, what this means, because sometimes I know everyone sees data and goes, I just don't understand how that applies to improving my store. Okay, so the fourth one we're going to look at is the time on site and the page views per visit. Now, they're pretty self-explanatory, guys. So, you know, one thing to note, some of these metrics, the higher the percentage or the higher the number, people perceive that as a good thing. Not always, okay? So if you have a higher than average time on site and page views per visit, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is great. So if people are spending a lot of time on, you know, clicking around and not really doing anything, it could actually signify the fact that your site is just confusing the heck out of them. And I see this a lot on e-com. To know it with e-commerce, and if you haven't done this yet and you've got an e-commerce site, make sure you go to your site on desktop, which most people do if they are the store owner, but also test it out on your mobile phone. And if you have have access to a tablet as well, check it out on that, or get someone who does have one, because what you tend to find is that sometimes the usability or the functionality on those different platforms can be significantly altered. So you may see this, you can actually break a lot of this down based off device as well. So if you notice that, you know, the time on site without taking an action is considerably high on mobile, but it's actually okay on desktop, that might actually signify that mobile usage is, the mobile website is actually really confusing for the user. So just something to take note of on that one as well. The bounce rate also it refers to, this is a really common metric and something that is pretty consistent across most websites. It's the percentage of visitors who come to your site and then leave after being on the homepage, the one page that they get to. Now, this basically means that the content in question is not really engaging them. It kind of does. Now, what I say it kind of does is, obviously if you've got a high bounce rate, and when I say high, you know, 80, 90%, say again, it comes back down to the traffic you've sent to your site. If it's not relevant traffic and people are just getting to your site and leaving, that's not a good thing, because obviously you've spent money getting people there, and if it's the wrong content, or it could be the wrong content, it could be the wrong product. It could also be the fact that your website is too slow to load. So check as well how fast your website's loading. Is it actually giving you the right, is it loading in fast enough? You could have too many, and we see this a lot. There's actually, Google has a free tool, which I will share around for people as well, that actually processes and does a bit of an analysis on your site from a mobile and desktop perspective, and will give you really clear, I guess, instructions on how to improve it. But it could be that you've just got too many big photos on your site, or too much content, and it just takes too long to load. So that means that half the time, some people might not even get to your homepage, which again, if you're paying for advertising, yeah, not a good thing because it's basically money down the drain. The other thing as well, again, it could be the wrong targeting. We want to make sure that your bounce rate is pretty low. Now, it depends, again, when you look at the time on site as well versus the bounce rate, that's actually pretty good to look at. So if people have been on your site for, a few minutes, obviously, but maybe they've been on time of site for 0.01 seconds or it hasn't even registered, that's telling you very quickly that they're not even getting to your homepage. So check those metrics out. And if you've got someone working on these metrics here, the on-page metrics would be ones you'd be referring to your SEO team or your development team as well. So that'd be questions I'd be asking them to give you insight around that as well. If you're not sure, hit them up, and I'm sure they should be able to give you some benchmarks around your industry as well. Because in ecom, different verticals will prove to have different benefits, and I'll explain that in a few other situations too. That the metrics kind of change dependent on a few what you're selling. Okay, now the conversion rate. Now this is the holy grail of what every e-commerce marketer is looking at. So as I mentioned earlier, it's the percentage of people who have made a purchase on your site versus how many visitors have been on your site. So by far, if you're looking at anything and you want to start anywhere, improve your conversion rate. So all the ones I've spoken to before feed into your conversion rate. So if you are getting good traffic to your site, your products are relevant to your visitors, you're getting a decent add to cart rate, you're going to get people converting. And you also employ a retargeting strategy as well, then you will get, in theory, a good conversion rate. If not, there is something within that chain of events that is going wrong. And so you need to test and optimize to make sure and figure it out. I can't tell you what it would be because every site is different. What I would recommend installing, there's a free tool called Hotjar. There is also Hotjar. There are other ones equivalent as well, but that one has a free option. What it actually does is it tracks anonymously users when they go to your site. So it will actually track the mouse and where people are clicking and hotspots to basically show you where people are dropping off, or basically it's fantastic. But that is for me, it's about collecting data so you can actually stop assuming and making assumptions and make informed decisions when you're testing things out. There's so many tools like that available, but that's one I would recommend putting in. Your conversion rate, effectively, once you increase your conversion rate, you make more sales. So now this is extremely important, especially if you're spending advertising dollars and you have to meet a certain target from a return perspective. So say for every dollar in, you want to make $5 back, so 5 times return. So if your conversion rate is low, that's obviously going to drop or lower the return on your investment, because say you're sending 100 people there, only one person is purchasing, that's going to equate to one purchase of say $100. But if you increase, that's 1% conversion rate. If you increase that to 3% conversion rate, 3 people are buying and then you're making $300. So you're spending the same amount of money to get the same amount of people to your site, but by increasing your conversion rate, you're making more profit. You're making more revenue, I should say, and then obviously that is going to give you a better return on your marketing investment. So by far, if you improve this will definitely have a pretty good impact on your site performance. Now, something else you want to look at now this is getting into more of the, I guess, the sales metrics. So average order value, or AOV, you may see this, the acronym used in quite a few different, if you do a lot of reading on e-commerce and things like that, you'll probably see this mentioned around quite a few places. This is the average amount of money that your customers spend in a single transaction. So again, if you have a average order value of, let's say, $100 again. Now, if you increase your average order value, that means, again, you're going to be making more return off your customer, because, again, if you increase that, they're going to be spending more. And again, you're still spending the same amount of money to acquire or get people to your website. Now, there's a few, this is what I was saying before around different stores or different businesses and the average order value really having an impact. Now, the conversion and your conversion rate. So, for example, you may have a high conversion rate, but you're not so profitable average order value. So let me give you an example. Like, say you're selling engagement rings, right? Your average order value may be $5,000, but your conversion rate may be 1%. And so you may convert lower, but you're actually making a lot more money in that single transaction. However, if you are selling, water bottles, for example, and you're only selling one product, then on average, and let's say $20, but your conversion rate is at 1% as well, can you see the difference? And say you might be spending a very similar amount to acquire that customer, but in this respect, if you've got a low average order value, you need to be making sure your conversion rate is a lot higher because it's a volume play. Now, the other thing as well is when it comes to average order value, you want to be sitting, if you're running any advertising or you are pretty much doing any paid activity, I would say, based off what I've seen with our clients, you probably want to be sitting minimum at an average order value of around $50. Now, the reason I say that, when it comes to advertising, especially using Facebook and platforms like that or Instagram, there tends to be, when you're buying ads, you're looking at a cost per click, so how much is costing the user to click on it. As I mentioned, then click-through rate as we went through before. Now, those metrics tend to be, let's just say there might be a benchmark of around a cost per click. On average, it might cost about $2, and every industry is different, but let's just say it's that, and a click-through rate may be 1 or 2%. Now, it's going to be very, very hard for you to make your money back if your average order value isn't $50 or higher. Now, ways you can increase that, you've got to think about ways to increase the basket size. Now, when you hit basket size, that is the amount that is sitting in your add to cart at any time. So what you may see on e-commerce is that you might see different tricks of, hey, buy 2 and get 10% off. So then obviously it will increase the average order value, but you've got to watch your profit margins and this stuff. And this is where it can get a bit messy. Just make sure you figure out if you're still going to be making money when you do these things. A lot of people just try and do a race to fill up the cart, but actually the average order value may end up being $100, but it actually costs them $90 to get the products in after they've paid their staff and overheads, etc. So again, know your numbers, understand what profit margins you've got to play with when you're doing things like this. Another thing may be, if you have a complementary product. So for example, if you're buying a water bottle and say it's a fitness website, it might be a fitness water bottle, it might also have at the bottom, hey, here are other products that people like you have bought, or here's something that goes with this, and it might be a running kit or something like that. So it's really, as a good e-commerce marketer, you need to be able to take your customer on that journey. And again, it's relevancy. So with the baby example, say the pacifier one, maybe it is, the pacifier pops up, and then you have examples of a pacifier cleaning kit. It might also have, other products for new mums, for example. What you want to do is you want to make it as easy as possible. And you'll see this on a lot of the time on the checkout page. There might be, hey, would you like to, have you thought about this product, etc. But think about different ways, and how you do this is there's 2 different ways. You can obviously look at what your data and what products people are buying together, so you actually see what tends to work as a package deal. If you haven't got that yet and you're starting from scratch, go and poll your audience. If you've got a social media page or a channel or an email database, do a survey. Go to them saying, hey, what are the 3 products that you would love to see you can't live without? Or what is the number one thing that you love about having a pacifier, and what products would you recommend to other mums as a new mum that you must have? And then by polling your audience, you're not making assumptions then. Again, as I said before, I love data, and this is how we've been able to help so many clients make strategic decisions, is because we don't make assumptions. We go and we find out what the customer really wants. Do that. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't cost a lot of time to do that stuff, especially if you've got an existing audience. And And if you don't already, then what I would recommend is creating some content and putting a little bit of advertising behind it to your target market and see what comes back. You might run an offer. It might be a gift pack. Hey, let us know your favorite XYZ and win a $50 gift pack. And I guarantee you'll get some return in a form of at least some insight into what your customer's thinking. All right, so cart abandonment rate. So this is basically the rate of people that have added, basically have placed an item in their cart but didn't actually make a purchase. So this is a good metric to really look at to understand really if you, I went through that too crazily. If there might be an issue with your cart process. Now, what I mean by that, if someone's added to cart and then there might be 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes steps before they can purchase, this is a really good indication that you will need to look at ways to optimize your checkout page potentially. Now, depending on what platform you're using, there are definitely ways and tools that you can help expedite the process. If it's on payment, there's things like Afterpay. There's Google Pay. There's a whole lot of other things that really have a impact on making it easier for that person to buy. But again, there are always hidden costs with this stuff, guys. So when you're looking at your checkout functionality for ecom, make sure that you are also looking at, if you're using a third-party provider to complete a payment, make sure you're very aware of the percentage that they're taking of that sale. Again, it comes down to profit margins. Make sure you account for that, because otherwise it can catch you out as an e-commerce an e-commerce owner. So always look at your merchants, understand what they're costing you and how that impacts your bottom line. I can't stress that enough. Especially look at what happens from a volume perspective. So if you may start out small, and it may work. Something may work for you if you're maybe making, let's say, 100 transactions a month, right? But let's say you kill it with your marketing strategy, and that goes from 100 to, let's say, 1,000 a month. Now, some of these merchants have clauses in that, and they actually change their pricing dependent on the scalability. It can be for better, it can be for worse. The other thing as well is, making sure that it might have worked for you from a smaller standpoint, but just always reevaluate your margins when you're going and your merchants as well, and make sure it works for you. And a lot of these guys can be negotiated with as well, the bigger you get, but that's when you get to multiple thousand sales a day effectively, but that may be you. All right, retention rate. Now, this is where we're getting into the loyalty stuff, guys. So now, when we say about loyalty, basically, a retention rate is the percentage of customers you keep on board over a given period of time. Just for, to kind of clarify that. Now, what you want to be making sure here is that a lot of people forget to take away, people who have just bought one product, that isn't a retained customer. So you want to take away, let's say, customers that have come back, your total number of customers for, say, a month, and then subtract the new customers during that period. Because basically what you want to be able to do is understand how many people are coming back and what that retention looks like. Now, more importantly, I think when you look at the retention is actually, when you're able to track the retention of people coming back, you can then start to track the lifetime value of a customer. Now, again, it comes back to, the lifetime value is basically how much a customer is worth to your business over the time that they are buying from you. So let's look at it this way. So if I am a fashion brand, for example, and I sell seasonal products, I want to be able to track the lifetime value of my customers. So say I came in originally through a Facebook ad. That Facebook ad cost the business to acquire me, let's say, $40. So if I buy one piece of clothing at $80, sure, I've made, you've got a 2 times return. But what you really want to know, you want to be understanding is, if I keep coming back and I keep buying an $80 product every month, obviously my value to that business is going to be considerably higher, and the revenue that you've made off me is significantly more than if you're just paying every time to get one customer back through the door again. So this is, in ecom, the thing that really makes the difference is loyalty. And this is where having a visibility on this is very, very important. Now, if you're using any of those e-commerce platforms that I mentioned before, that's fantastic. But what I also, this is for more established businesses. If you've got the pricing and the revenue, there are customer relationship management systems out there, CRMs, that will give you so much more information on this. And if you connect them into your backend, it will actually start to give you a full profile. So let's say, okay, Claudia, I've come in and bought X amount of clothing over the last 3 years. It will tell you everything, basically everything I've bought, the time I'm likely to buy, my size, everything about me. And then from there, we may start to see a group of customers that look very similar to me. So you can start to do promotions to that direct group of customers that are, again, relevancy. The more data you have, the more you apply it, the more relevant your communications become, the increased sales you get. So it's a pretty simple formula, but again, it's making sure you understand really how this can impact not only your marketing, but if you know from a lifetime value recording, or even what your top 10 customers are doing, if you can see that they love to pre-order, maybe most of them are a size 12 in fashion or whatever that is, that's actually business data you can feed into your production team. So that's going to tell you, how many runs of each size you need to make, or colors, or whatever that is, because, well, it's not going to be specific, but it's going to give you a really good indication. So then it's going to reduce your overheads from a production standpoint, and hopefully meaning that you won't have as much stock if you've got stock on hand, and you're able to get rid of it quicker. And ideally, with e-com or any kind of retail, it's that balance between what you've got in the storeroom or the warehouse, or what you've committed to versus what's going out, because it's a cash flow, which is that can get people stuck. And I'm sure many people have probably experienced that recently. So the more data you can get off this, and the more that you can get people to repeat buy, the more you're going to have an effective profit margin at the end of the day. Now, again, I've already touched on this, but the repeat customer rate really is the people that have made a total more than one purchase over time. Again, it all feeds into lifetime value, guys, but those other metrics are ones you need to know in order to get this. Now, definitely make sure that you are looking at this if you look at Shopify, for example, it'll give you really top line metrics dependent on the level of Shopify you have. If you're on Shopify Plus, it's going to give you'll get a lot of this information completely. But, it's really making sure that you are understanding how you can analyze these key metrics to really start to inform business decisions, from how to get people in, the traffic drivers, when on site, what to do, the sales process, the shopping cart process, how to improve that and your conversion. And then at the end of it, how to really look at the real cost of your marketing. Something else as well, when I talk about cost of marketing, and this is something, if you're an e-commerce owner and you are dealing with an agency and you say to them, I want to pay $40 per acquisition of a customer, right? So my average order value is $120. I want a 3 times return. So $40 is what I'm willing to pay for my acquisition of a customer. If you're not looking at how you can improve the lifetime value, and what I mean by this is that once that person has purchased, they're in your email database, right? So this is why I love email and e-com as well, because if you can start to convert them through e-com, technically you're not paying for that to reacquire them again. Sure, you may have a little bit of, they may get targeted by some of your retargeting if they've gone to the site and haven't purchased, but that tends to be a lot less expensive than paying $40 each time to make a sale. So you've got to think, what I'm trying to say is, think strategically about this. If you know that, and you'll get this through the data, if you know that it costs you upfront $40 to acquire a customer, but if you nurture them through your email sequences and VIP sequences, etc., that customer ends up being worth $1,000 to you. That $40 seems pretty small to acquire them in the long run. So again, think bigger and think more strategically when it comes to this stuff, because when you start to know what to look for, and if you look at these main metrics across your reporting and data, it will be completely a game changer for you, I'm sure. That's pretty much it, what I've got, guys. I think I wanted to keep it open. We've got 15 minutes left for Q&A because I think there's, as I said, there's a lot of information in there, and hopefully that was valuable to you.